The September sun burned mercilessly over the Tennessee hills when screams echoed through the valley. Atsila Cherokee felt the packed earth tighten around her neck like a hungry serpent, while her tears mixed with the red dust covering her face. Only her head emerged from the arid soil, exposed to the scalding heat that had already begun to crack her young lips. Her dark eyes desperately scanned the empty horizon, searching for any sign of hope among the stones and thorny shrubs that stretched endlessly before her. The punishment had been decided by the tribal council at dawn the previous day, when they discovered she had been secretly meeting with a young man from a rival tribe during the past 4 moons. Atsila's breathing grew more labored with each passing hour, her parched throat barely able to form the whispered prayers she directed to her ancestors. Her raven-black hair stuck to her sweaty forehead, forming small strands that danced with the hot afternoon breeze. The weight of the earth pressed against her buried shoulders, constantly reminding her of the gravity of her transgression in the eyes of her people. She had chosen love over tribal loyalty, and now paid the price established by the ancient traditions of her nation. The hours dragged like a cruel eternity, while flies buzzed around her defenseless face, drawn by the salt of her silent tears. When twilight began to paint the sky blood red, Atsila had already lost track of time and nearly all hope. Her mind floated between consciousness and unconsciousness, alternating between moments of painful lucidity and periods of feverish dreams where she ran free through the prairies of her childhood. The approaching night's cold brought temporary relief to her body tortured by heat, but also the terrible certainty that she might not survive until dawn. Her lips silently murmured Naalnish's name, the young Apache for whom she had risked everything, wondering if he would ever know of her fate. Darkness gradually enveloped the desolate landscape, transforming the distant hills into threatening shadows that seemed to move with a life of their own. The distant sound of hooves against stone echoed through the silent night, so faint that Atsila initially thought it was just another of the many dreams tormenting her feverish mind. 3 Apache riders emerged from the darkness like desert phantoms, their silhouettes outlined against the starry sky as they followed a trail that would lead them away from Cherokee lands. Naalnish rode at the front, his black eyes constantly scanning the terrain for signs of danger, when something unusual caught his attention in the distant hills. A strange form stood out against the pale ground, too small to be a rock, too large to be ignored. His Apache intuition, sharpened by years of hunting and desert survival, warned him that something was deeply wrong in that seemingly deserted place. He raised his right hand, silently signaling his companions to stop, and dismounted with feline agility. His bare feet touched the rocky ground without making a sound, moving with the precision of one who had learned since childhood to be one with earth and wind. With each cautious step toward the mysterious form, his heart beat faster, as if sensing that his life was about to change forever. The other warriors remained mounted, watching attentively as Naalnish approached what appeared to be just another irregularity in the nocturnal landscape. When he was finally close enough to clearly distinguish the form, his feet stopped abruptly, and a muffled cry escaped his throat. A human head emerged from the ground, like a dark flower blooming in the darkness, the face of a young woman twisted by pain and exhaustion. Naalnish fell to his knees instantly, his hands gently touching the familiar face that had haunted his dreams during the past weeks of forced separation. It was Atsila, his beloved Cherokee, buried alive as punishment for daring to love beyond tribal boundaries. His tears mixed with hers as he whispered her name repeatedly, like a desperate prayer to the spirits of the night. Atsila's parched lips moved weakly, trying to form words that her exhausted body could barely pronounce, while her eyes filled with renewed light upon recognizing the man she loved. Without hesitating a second, Naalnish began digging around Atsila's delicate neck with his own hands, his nails breaking against the packed earth that had been trampled and purposely hardened. Each handful of earth he removed revealed more of her fragile body, buried up to her shoulders in the cruelty of an ancestral punishment. His fingers bled as he worked frantically, removing stone by stone, grain by grain, as if excavating not just earth, but the very fate that tried to separate them. The other Apaches dismounted and approached, recognizing the urgency of the situation, even without fully understanding the connection between their companion and that young Cherokee woman. The crescent moon illuminated the desperate scene, creating dramatic shadows that danced to the rhythm of Naalnish's frantic movements as he fought against time and death. The first hours of dawn witnessed the slow and painful miracle of Atsila's liberation. Naalnish had dug until his hands became bloody wounds, but finally managed to free the young woman's delicate arms, allowing her to help in her own salvation. Her fingers intertwined with his in a desperate dance of survival, both digging together until she finally emerged completely from the improvised tomb that had almost become her end. When Atsila managed to stand with difficulty, leaning against Naalnish's strong chest, their bodies trembled together not only from the dawn's cold, but from the emotional intensity of their impossible reunion. She had been so close to death that each breath now seemed like a gift from the ancestors, each heartbeat a silent celebration of life. Naalnish carried Atsila to where a small stream cut through the hills waited, its crystalline waters reflecting the night's last stars. With infinite tenderness, he carefully washed the earth stuck in her hair and face, his fingers tracing each contour of her features, as if rediscovering a lost treasure. The cold water revitalized Atsila's numbed senses, gradually bringing her back to full consciousness and allowing her to finally completely understand the magnitude of her rescue. Her eyes met his in the dawn's silver light, and in that silent moment, both knew there was no longer any possibility of returning to their former lives. They had crossed an invisible line from which there was no return, sealing their destiny with blood, earth, and tears. Naalnish's Apache companions watched the scene with a mixture of respect and concern, instinctively understanding that they were witnessing something greater than a simple rescue. Tashunka, the eldest of the three, slowly approached and extended his own blanket to cover Atsila's trembling shoulders, a gesture of acceptance that spoke louder than any words. The second warrior, Egil, offered fresh water from his canteen and some dried meat, observing how she received each gesture of kindness with silent tears of gratitude. Even being from traditionally rival tribes, something in Atsila's vulnerability and dignity deeply touched these desert men's hearts, making them recognize in her not an enemy, but a woman who had suffered unjustly for the crime of loving. When the sun finally broke the horizon, painting the hills gold and orange, Naalnish made the decision that would forever change the course of their lives. He knelt before Atsila and, taking her small hands between his larger, calloused ones, made a silent promise that echoed through the morning winds. His eyes communicated what his words didn't need to express. He would never allow her to suffer again, even if it meant abandoning his own tribe and becoming an exile. Atsila perfectly understood the magnitude of the sacrifice he was willing to make, and feeds with an almost imperceptible nod of her head, accepted to share with him whatever destiny awaited them. Dawn found them united not only by love, but by an unshakable determination to build together a new life, far from the prejudices and traditions that had almost destroyed them. The decision to leave immediately was made without discussion, as everyone knew that with each moment they remained in those hills, the danger increased exponentially. Atsila, still weak but determined, mounted behind Naalnish on his pinto horse, her arms wrapping around his waist as if he were her only connection to life. The small Apache group began a journey that would take them far from both Cherokee lands and traditional Apache territories, seeking a neutral place where they could find refuge and peace. The western mountains rose like silent guardians, promising shelter for those brave enough to defy tribal conventions in the name of love. Each step of the horses distanced them more from everything they knew, but brought them closer to a freedom they had never imagined possible. During the first week of travel, Atsila slowly recovered her strength under the attentive care of Naalnish and his companions. Tashunka, who had lost a daughter in an attack years before, began treating Atsila with the paternal tenderness he had kept in his heart for so long. Egil, initially distrustful of a Cherokee woman's presence in their group, gradually surrendered to the young woman's silent charm and natural dignity. They established camp in isolated locations, always near fresh water sources, and shared their simple meals like an improvised family united by extraordinary circumstances. The nights were filled with the sound of stories told around the fire, where Atsila learned about Apache customs while sharing some aspects of Cherokee culture. As the days passed, Naalnish and Atsila found precious moments of intimacy away from the others' eyes, walking together at sunset along the banks of crystalline rivers or climbing small elevations to contemplate the stars. They talked about dreams and fears, about the families they had left behind and about the uncertain future awaiting them in unknown lands. Naalnish told about his childhood in the desert, about how he had learned to read nature's signs and survive with minimal resources, while Atsila shared memories of her Cherokee village, the songs her grandmother had taught her, and the rituals that marked the seasons. Each shared story brought them closer, weaving between them a tapestry of mutual understanding that transcended cultural differences. The realization that they were being followed came gradually, like a shadow slowly lengthening at dusk. Tashunka was the first to notice the subtle signs, fresh footprints in places they had passed days before, branches broken in ways that didn't seem natural, ashes from fires too close to their own roots. The pursuers were skilled, probably Cherokee warriors determined to recover Atsila and punish those who had interfered with their tribal justice. Tension in the group increased perceptibly, and Naalnish began taking extra precautions, choosing more difficult routes and establishing more rigorous night watches. Atsila perceived the change in the men's behavior, and, although no one verbalized the situation, she instinctively understood that her presence had put everyone in mortal danger. During a particularly cold night, while the others slept, Atsila seriously contemplated the possibility of leaving alone, sacrificing her own safety to protect those who had risked everything for her. Her fingers gently traced Naalnish's sleeping face, memorizing every line, every scar, every detail of the man who had saved her life and conquered her heart. The waning moon dimly illuminated her face as she struggled internally between love and duty, between personal happiness and responsibility for others. Silent tears rolled down her cheeks when she finally understood that true love sometimes requires the greatest sacrifices, and that protecting those we love can mean renouncing our own happiness. Dawn brought confirmation of the group's worst fears when they spotted smoke rising in the distance, in the exact direction from where they had come. Naalnish woke instantly at Atsila's slightest touch, his warrior instincts immediately alerting him that something was wrong. Without needing verbal explanations, everyone quickly broke camp and departed on a more intense journey toward the Rocky Mountains, where they hoped to find more favorable terrain for defense or hiding. Atsila now rode her own horse, a gift from Tashunka, and her erect posture in the saddle demonstrated an iron determination that impressed even the experienced Apache warriors. The group moved as a single entity, each member anticipating the others' needs in a silent dance of survival. When they reached a narrow passage between two imposing rock formations, Naalnish made a decision that would divide the group forever. He instructed Tashunka and Aigle to continue west with the horses and supplies, creating a false trail that the pursuers would follow, while he and Atsila took refuge in a hidden cave he had known since youth. The separation was painful for everyone, as they had become a chosen family united by extraordinary circumstances and mutual loyalty. Tashunka embraced Atsila as he would a daughter, whispering in Apache a blessing she understood perfectly, despite the linguistic barrier. Aigle offered Naalnish his best arrows and sharpest knife, gestures that communicated more respect and fraternal love than 1,000 words could express. The cave chosen by Naalnish was a natural marvel hidden behind a waterfall that fell from considerable height, creating a water curtain that completely masked the entrance. Atsila was impressed by the wild beauty of the place. Stalactites hung from the ceiling like teeth of some mythical animal, while an underground stream ran gently across the cave floor, providing fresh water and a calming sound that muffled any noise they might make. Light filtered through the waterfall created an almost magical environment where the rocky walls gleamed with moisture and golden reflections. There, isolated from the outside world, Naalnish and Atsila finally found a moment of true peace, away from the persecutions and prejudices that had dominated their lives. In their first days in the secret refuge, they established a simple but meaningful domestic routine. Naalnish went out every morning to hunt small animals and gather wild fruits, always taking care not to leave traces that could reveal their location. Atsila organized the cave's interior, creating specific areas for sleeping, cooking, and storing supplies. Using her Cherokee skill for working with natural materials, they cooked without making fire during the day, taking advantage of a natural crack in the rock that dispersed smoke, and at night shared simple meals by the light of small torches made with animal fat. Their conversations became more intimate and deep, exploring not only their personal histories, but also their dreams for a future that seemed increasingly possible in that natural sanctuary. It was during one of those tranquil nights that Atsila finally managed to speak about the trauma of being buried alive, describing to Naalnish not just the physical pain, but mainly the emotional despair of feeling abandoned by her own people. She related how, during the darkest hours of her ordeal, she had held on to his memory as her only source of hope, visualizing his face and remembering every moment they had shared during their secret meetings. Naalnish, in turn, confessed how he had had nightmares every night since leaving the Apache village, dreaming that he arrived too late to save her, waking in cold sweat with the sound of her screams echoing in his mind. These moments of mutual vulnerability brought them even closer, creating between them an emotional intimacy that transcended any cultural or tribal difference. Weeks transformed into months, while Naalnish and Atsila built a new and unlikely life in their hidden refuge. The cave became more than a hideout. It transformed into a home where every stone, every shadow, every sound of the waterfall carried precious memories of their union. Atsila learned to identify different animal tracks in the mud near the stream, while Naalnish developed an impressive ability to fish with his hands in the cave's deeper pools. They created simple tools using sharp stones and resistant branches, establishing a domestic harmony that neither had experienced in their tribes of origin. The surrounding wilderness became their ally, providing everything they needed to survive and prosper far from civilization. During the winter months, when the waterfall partially froze, creating ice curtains that made their entrance even more secret, Atsila discovered she carried in her womb the fruit of her love with Naalnish. The revelation came gradually, through small signs that her Cherokee feminine wisdom recognized instinctively: increased sensitivity to certain smells, morning fatigue, subtle changes in her body. When she finally shared the news with Naalnish on a particularly cold morning, when light filtered through ice-created dancing patterns on the cave walls, he took her in his arms and spun with her, laughing and crying simultaneously with joy. Both understood that this child represented not only the continuation of their lives, but the creation of something entirely new, a family that transcended tribal boundaries. Atsila's pregnancy brought a new dimension to their love and determination to build a secure future. Naalnish became even more cautious in his outings from the cave, always returning before nightfall and bringing the best food he could find to nourish the mother and child growing in her womb. Atsila, in turn, began preparing necessary items for the baby, weaving small blankets with plant fibers that grew near the waterfall and molding small clay utensils with clay found on the underground stream's banks. They spent nights talking about how they would raise their child, deciding that he or she would learn the best of both Cherokee and Apache traditions, becoming a bridge between two seemingly irreconcilable worlds. As spring arrived and the waterfall returned to flowing with full force, disturbing signs began appearing near their refuge. Naalnish found recent human footprints on a trail he thought was known only to him, and small signs that someone had systematically searched the area. The pursuers, apparently, had never given up their search, and now were dangerously approaching their secret sanctuary. Tension returned to the couple, but now it was magnified by the responsibility of protecting not only their own lives, but also the life of the child Atsila carried. They began discussing escape plans, studying alternative routes they could use if discovered, always considering the limitations imposed by Atsila's advanced pregnancy. One night, while the full moon illuminated the waterfall, creating nocturnal rainbows in the mist, Atsila woke with a terrible premonition. Her maternal instincts, sharpened by pregnancy, alerted her that something was fundamentally wrong in the outside world. She gently touched Naalnish's shoulder, awakening him without making noise, and together they remained in absolute silence, listening carefully to the night's sounds. Beyond the familiar noise of the waterfall and wind in the trees, there was something more, The almost imperceptible sound of cautious human movements, the occasional creak of leather against rock, the controlled breathing of men trying to move silently. Their pursuers had finally found their refuge, and now surrounded the cave like experienced hunters preparing to capture their prey. Dawn arrived tense and silent, with Naalnish and Atsila preparing for what they knew was inevitable. He had spent the night sharpening his weapons and checking every possible escape route, while she organized the few essential belongings they could carry in a desperate flight. Their movements were coordinated by the experience of months living together, each gesture anticipated by the other in a silent dance of preparation for battle. Atsila, despite her advanced pregnancy, demonstrated an iron determination that impressed even Naalnish, her eyes shining with the protective ferocity of a mother willing to do anything to defend her family. The cave that had been their paradise for so long now seemed more like a trap, its rocky walls echoing with the tension of a storm about to explode. When the first rays of sun pierced through the waterfall, revealing human silhouettes moving in the outer rocks, Naalnish immediately recognized the clothing and postures of Cherokee warriors. There were 6 experienced men, led by Sequoia, Atsila's older brother, whose expression of implacable determination revealed he would not return home without completing his mission. The warriors had positioned themselves strategically around the cave entrance, blocking all possible escape routes and demonstrating impressive knowledge of the local topography. Naalnish instantly understood this was not an impulsive pursuit motivated only by anger, but a military operation carefully planned by men who knew perfectly both their prey and the terrain. Sequoia's voice echoed through the waterfall with unquestionable authority, calling his sister by name and demanding she surrender to face the consequences of her actions. His words carried not only the authority of a tribal leader, but also the personal pain of a brother who felt betrayed by the person he loved most in the world. Atsila felt her heart break, hearing the familiar voice, filled with a sadness that went far beyond simple disappointment, echoing the internal conflict of a man divided between family love and tribal duty. She placed her hand protectively over her belly, feeling the child move as if it too perceived the tension permeating the air, and looked at Naalnish with a determination that spoke louder than any words. Naalnish positioned himself at the cave entrance, partially hidden by the water curtain, but visible enough for the Cherokee to see him clearly. His posture was simultaneously defiant and respectful, recognizing the legitimacy of the pursuers' feelings while making clear he would not surrender Atsila without a fight. He raised his weapons in a traditional Apache salute, a gesture that communicated both respect for adversaries and determination to defend his family to the death. The Cherokee warriors responded with their own salutes, recognizing in the young Apache a worthy adversary, even though he was responsible for the entire situation that had brought them there. The tension in the air was palpable, charged with the electricity that precedes great storms. It was then that Atsila made the decision that would define the fate of everyone present. She moved to stand beside Naalnish, her hand finding his in a public demonstration of unity that echoed through the rocks like a silent war cry. Her voice, when she finally spoke, carried all the authority of a woman who had faced death and emerged stronger, all the dignity of someone who had chosen love above social convention. She addressed her brother directly, explaining that she carried a child, that she had found in the cave not only physical refuge, but also a true home, and that she would rather die beside the man she loved than live separated from him. Her words cut through the morning air like precise arrows, striking the heart of each man present and forcing them to confront the reality that they faced not a desperate fugitive, but a woman transformed by love into something greater than the traditions that tried to control her. The silence that followed Atsila's words seemed to last an eternity, suspended in air like the waterfall itself that had witnessed so many moments of love, and now witnessed a moment of definitive truth. Sequoia slowly lowered his weapon, his face reflecting an internal struggle between the ancestral traditions he had sworn to defend and the unconditional love he felt for the sister he saw for the first time as an adult woman, capable of making her own decisions. The other Cherokee warriors watched their leader, waiting for a signal that would determine whether that place would become a battlefield or the scene of a new kind of justice. The morning wind whispered through the trees, carrying with it the perfume of wildflowers and the distant sound of singing birds, creating a poetic contrast with the mortal tension hanging over the group. Naalnish remained motionless beside Atsila, his hand firmly intertwined with hers, prepared to fight to the death if necessary, but also demonstrating through his posture that he respected whatever decision she made. His eyes never left Sequoia's, communicating silently from man to man the depth of his love for Atsila and his determination to protect her and the child she carried. There was no unnecessary challenge in his posture, only the quiet dignity of someone who had found something more valuable than life itself and was willing to defend it with all his strength. The morning light played on his face, revealing not the savage warrior the Cherokee expected to find, but a man transformed by love into something noble and worthy of respect. Sequoia took a step forward, his weapons lowered but still in his hands, and looked deeply into his sister's eyes. What he saw there, the maturity forged by suffering, the determination tempered by love, the silent strength of someone who had faced death and chosen life, forced him to recognize that the girl he had protected throughout childhood no longer existed. In her place was a woman who had made difficult decisions and was prepared to live with the consequences, a mother who would protect her family with the same ferocity he himself would demonstrate. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, he nodded, not in approval but in recognition of the unchangeable reality of the situation. His words, when they finally came, were directed to both Atsila and Naalnish, declaring that the Cherokee would no longer pursue them, but that they could also never return to their people's lands. What happened next surprised everyone present. One by one, the Cherokee warriors approached Atsila, each offering a small gift, medicinal plant seeds, a protection amulet for the child to come, a small but sharp knife for domestic use. These were not farewell presents, but symbols of recognition that, although she had chosen a different path than expected, she still carried Cherokee blood and deserved to depart with her people's blessings. Naalnish was similarly honored, receiving a finely crafted Cherokee bow as a symbol of respect from warrior to warrior. Sequoia was the last to approach, removing from his own neck a necklace that had belonged to their mother and gently placing it around Atsila's neck, whispering an ancestral blessing for her and the child she carried. When the sun was high in the sky and the Cherokee finally departed, disappearing among the trees like morning shadows dissolved by light, Naalnish and Atsila remained at the entrance of their cave, watching the empty horizon with a mixture of relief and melancholy. They had conquered something rare and precious, the right to love freely, but at a cost they were only beginning to fully understand. Atsila placed her hand over her belly, feeling the child move as if celebrating its parents' victory, and smiled through the tears that silently streamed down her cheeks. Naalnish wrapped her in his arms, and together they contemplated the distant mountains where they would build a new life, far from the prejudices and traditions that had almost destroyed them. There, at the threshold of their secret refuge that had become a sanctuary of true love, they understood they had conquered something more valuable than any territory or wealth, the freedom to be who they truly were, together forever. Their story would become legend among the mountain peoples, whispered around fires for future generations, the story of a Cherokee woman who chose love over tradition, of an Apache warrior who risked everything to save a heart that beat in unison with his own, and of a child who would be born free from the bonds that had imprisoned their parents. The wind carried their silent promises through the valleys, where they would echo forever, as testimony that true love, when tested by the greatest adversities, emerges not only intact, but transformed into something eternal and unbreakable. The waterfall continued to sing its eternal song, guarding the secrets of those who dared to defy the world for love. If you like this story, leave a like and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss the next stories.